Three, two, one, and I think we are golden. Cool. All right. So today, my guest is the real life Phantom of the Opera behind one of the leading brands in the beer drinking world. In a time when craft beer and microbreweries were scoffed at as pretentious hipster fads, he breathed life into a local business and helped take them from a local brewery to a nationwide phenomenon. He helped put Delaware on the map with the most famous export to come out of the state since that Joe Biden fella, and is largely responsible for the success of one of the most renowned craft breweries to date. Ranking in the top 20 breweries nationwide for over 10 years running, Dogfishhead is now a brand recognized by virtually every beer drinker across the country, where owner and founder Sam Calagione has
right.
that big, beautiful smile. My man today has a brain that puts Rain Man to shame. He is a former CFO, COO, CEO of Dogfish and has been a huge mentor in my life. And today he is willing to share some of that imparted wisdom, as well as, no doubt, inappropriate humor that I know all too well. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce to you my man, Nick Benz.
Peace.
Yeah. That's like a WWE entrance right there, baby.
Almost good enough to be a strip club announcer.
Almost. I've been told I have a personality for
Next
it.
to stage, Nick Benz.
Nick Benz. Make them dance for me. All right. So for those of you who don't know, Nick and I started out as sort of a Romeo and Juliet relationship. I was his first
That's true.
personal trainer and
Yes.
gym buddy. But don't let that teenage boy band figure fool you. My man is a straight up heathen in the gym. So before we get kind of into it today, obviously the name of the game is Brews with Bosses, and Lord knows he's got enough titles behind it without a resume, apparently. So what are we sipping on and why?
Well, thought we'd start with my wife's heritage, Hoegaarden. It's from Belgium. It is the global standard of what a wheat beer should be. Everybody else is an imitator.
And how is it pronounced?
Hoegaarden.
Hoegaarden.
Not Hoegaarden, Hoegaarden.
All right.
Channel your inner Dutch, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there. I'll point out right out of the gates that while those titles may have been relevant at Dogfish, most people know that my title was mostly C-Uh-Oh.
I forgot that one.
So sometimes you're creating the uh-oh, which I did, and sometimes you're squashing and fixing the uh-oh, which I did.
Yeah.
But yeah,
All right.
titles were somewhat meaningless in the beer business. They're more meaningful to the people you interact with in the business community. It lets them know who you are, what you do. But inside the beer business, those are kind of corporate douchey terms that the very anti-establishment, beard-wearing fools like Red, who are brewers and don't like to live by rules and like to believe and live in their own world and write their own rules. Those tags don't match.
Makes sense.
Anyway,
okay.
So
well,
we did have titles, but they were more external looking than internal.
Okay. Well, for a title, you can call me Red Daddy through the So let's help people get a little bit more clear as to your true affiliation with Dogfish. What was your role? And how important does that really make you in the company?
When I first joined, there was only about 35 people on the brewery side. The pub existed down in Rehoboth, the old pub, not the one that you can drive by and see today. There's probably about another 40 people in there or so, but it was tiny. We only had 6 100-barrel fermenters, cranking out about 7,000 barrels of beer. By comparison, I think, although I haven't been a Dogfish in a few years, I think they're about or just over 300,000 barrels right now, so it's substantially different. It's like grandma is cooking out of a 2-quart saucepan and then going to the school cafeteria and cooking out of the 100-quart saucepan. That's the kind of the difference of what small breweries and big breweries are. They do the same thing, but in very different ways, process-wise. So when I joined, it was super small.
Yeah.
It was entrepreneurial. It was idea after idea, and how do we breathe life into those ideas? And by and large, I can simplify our roles as Sam was the idea guy, I was the how do we get it done guy, and Mariah was the bullshit meter that sat between the two of us. And that was the dynamic that drove us for a very long time.
Yeah.
Through some crazy highs and crazy lows and crazy growth. Uh, but that world, when you first join, is not much unlike anybody who starts a company. You have a great idea, likely a good product or a product that's being developed, but you're resource constrained. Every resource you can imagine. You don't have enough money, you don't have enough people, you don't have enough equipment, you don't have enough knowledge, you don't have enough customers. So you do the best you can with the limited resources, and you have to MacGyver the shit out of everything you do to make everything count and last and get you to the next paycheck and get you to the next bank loan that you can borrow more to go buy more, to make more and hire more. And that was the dynamic. You just head down, you got to believe in the idea, which is not much unlike any entrepreneurial adventure. You got to believe in it and play your role. There's no such thing as that's not my job. You're wearing 50 hats every day, all day, and the hats are different every day. And that's what the early days are like. And then if I can very quickly jump to the end, because I'm sure we're going to come back. By the time you reach a company that was the size when I left Dogfish at the end of 2016, you're no longer wearing 50 hats. You're no longer getting in the trenches and doing everything. You now have the ability to hire the best and brightest and most talented people from around the country that come from different industries. You have the money to buy the best equipment in the world. You have time because you've planned better and you're not always firefighting an emergency, putting out the fires. You can be a little more strategic. And that's a luxury. So my job morphed from kind of sort of doing everything in the beginning to being in charge of an amazing group of people who were responsible for doing everything. And that is not much different than anybody who has an entrepreneurial story will go through those stages, from reactionary thinking to proactive thinking, from doing everything to hiring amazing people and making sure they have the tools and equipment and resources to make awesome happen. And that was one of the big rules I had to learn along the way. Is I grew up in a family in Northeast Pennsylvania where if you want it done right, you do it yourself mentality from my mom, and you just get it done. And at some point you have to recognize, or you won't survive. You need to hire people who can outthink you and outsmart you. And your job is to find those people, make sure they can in fact do that, give them the tools they need to do that, and get the fuck out of their way. So otherwise you're getting in the way and you're part of the problem. And that ability to switch from doing to overseeing awesome being done, that's a tough transition for, I suspect, a lot of people. It was tough for me, and it took years. It's not a light switch. You have to learn that over time as you move through the entrepreneurial phases of a company. But that's a little background.
That was, as you guys grew, you see this in restaurants a lot of the times. Like if you really want to advance as a restaurant, you get to the point where you can no longer micromanage things. So you had to get yourself to an established point where you guys were like, all right, if we're going to grow, we need to find people who are just as smart, if not smarter than us, to man here. And you actually described this process to me one time, where it was kind of like, if you want to look, we're going to look in the future. Like if I want to be in the future, then I need someone who's going to be here, and I need someone who's going to be here.
Yep. Well, it's the old analogy of skate to where the puck's going to be in hockey. You can't pass to the guy where he is. You can pass him to the guy where he's going to be.
Right.
And in business, that's the same way, but with thinking, not a puck. And you got to think where you want to be, because it takes time and change to get to that place. And if you're only thinking about where you are, then by the time you fine-tuned your idea, you've already outgrown that place. And you're constantly perpetuating firefighting. And that's what the early days of entrepreneur is. You solve the problems right in front of you today. I put that fire out, great, but now there's 3. Okay, I'm gonna put those 3 fires out. Now there's 5. So the challenge is, there's a moment where you come to that realization, this isn't self-sustaining. And how do we get to the point where we can both solve problems that are right in front of us and get us to a point that's 6 months or 8 months or 10 months into the horizon. And that way, yeah, you might still have a few coming at you, but you can reach a point where you get ahead of them, and you get out of that fighting mentality, which, by the way, I have found people love to exist in that. That's job security. If you're the person who knows how to, you're the only one who knows how to solve that little problem and fix that little widget and make that little machine hum like a, like a baby,
Yeah.
then that's job security. But that's not what we wanted when we found people. We wanted to find people. I had a saying at Dogfish, if you asked a lot of people, I had a few sayings, but one of them was always make new mistakes. It drove me nuts if I saw people making or fixing the same mistake over and over again. It means we weren't learning. Always make new mistakes means you're pushing the envelope enough and you're trying to advance enough that you're making mistakes while you go.
Mm-hmm.
But when there are always new mistakes, it means that the first fool me once, fool me twice idea.
Yeah.
And don't get fooled twice. Learn from it, move on, make a new one. I don't care if you make mistakes, just don't make the same mistakes over and over again.
But that got to the point where you were advising people of that. Where did you adapt that mentality along the way? Like, was that something that you just had inherently going into this, or you learned through mistakes?
We are all a collection of our experiences in life, just from mom and dad to church or religion, if that's part of your life, to the friends and family you surround yourself with, to the school and work experiences you've had. And I'm no different. I've had a few experiences where poor communication is oftentimes the downfall of pretty much any organization, business included. I found 90% of all issues we ever had was due to poor communication between departments, between individuals, between companies, between vendor and supplier. It doesn't matter. Just, well, I thought they knew, and assumptions, implications. So good proactive communication. I was a firm believer at Dogfish that it's a batch. You have somebody ordered the grain, and the brewer made a liquid called wort, hot sugary water. Then it went to the cellars, and the yeast eats that sugar, makes alcohol and farts CO2, and then they pass the baton to the filtration dudes, and the filtration dudes go to the packaging line to the warehouse ships it to the customer, and on and on. It's a constant baton passing through a process. Every decision you make affects somebody upstream and downstream of you. So don't make a decision that's going to come at the expense of somebody upstream or downstream. Make a global best decision that works for everybody. So I was a firm believer of any decision that needs to be made or any change that needs to be instituted, get everybody who that decision will affect in the room and make sure everybody buys off on it.
Yeah.
That eliminated the finger pointing and he said, she said, and why did you do that without consulting with me? This isn't just limited to the beer business. Same thing in a restaurant. You got that production versus sales friction, back of the house, front of the house in a restaurant. Communication.
Right.
Bartender to server, communication. Manager to staff, communication.
Well, where did that idea for you to get in bed with Dogfish even come from? Because if there was already like 35 people there, you said, when it started, where did that come from? Like, did they see you?
Well, I found Dogfish because I got rejected by every big swinging dick corporate job I wanted out of my MBA program. So through my own failure at securing, a real job, I went and joined the beer business.
There you go. And like I said, back then, that was a risky move.
Yeah, I made more money as an engineer before I did my full-time MBA. I made more money as an engineer than I did starting with Dogfish after I got my MBA. And that should have been more like a go in at 1x, come out at 2x kind of experience, but that's not what it was.
Yeah.
It was more because I needed to work. It was interesting and exciting. And I saw that Sam believed in the company, the products, and the beer, and what he had created enough. And I believed in my ability to solve the stuff that he looked at as challenges that he needed help solving.
Yeah.
And then it was just bury your head and go figure it out. And you get your teeth kicked in and you make a lot of mistakes along the way. So that mentality of always make new mistakes comes from my own disappointment in facing repetitive mistakes early on. You realize, oh, no, this is inefficient. We got to change, fix. as opposed to just sit there and can't be on a gerbil wheel spinning it faster and thinking you're making progress. You're just spinning a gerbil wheel faster.
Yeah.
And trying to teach people how to get off the gerbil wheel. I don't care if you crawl, but let's make progress. And that stems from early on feeling like I was stalling in my own efforts. So a whole lot of the stuff I've adopted along the way comes from areas I just got my teeth kicked in and mistakes I made, and then you adapt and evolve quick, or else I wouldn't have been in that role very long, or any of those roles very long.
Yeah. Do you think that that takes like a sort of sense of like humility or something to take where you said what you should have been making? Am I lagging real bad?
Am I what?
Am I lagging?
When you do that, it looks like you're tripping on acid. Your hands.
I'm not on acid. Can you hear me all right though?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, I just won't move. So does that take like a certain sense of humility or vision, like for you to get into there after you said you got denied by a couple different ones? 2011 rolls around and you guys ranked as the top brewery in America amongst like a shitload of other accolades for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that happening in the beginning, or was it just kind of like I'm getting along for the ride and we're going to see where it goes?
Well, being honest, yeah, in the beginning, you don't know where it's going to go. You were one of several hundred. There weren't many at the time. That was just something different, doing something in an industry differently, thinking differently, reaching a very small niche of people that were then called and still are beer geeks.
Mm.
And this is in an era when Yingling was very exotic compared to Butler Miller. And Anchor Steam would be very different. And a Sierra Pale Ale, like the Sam Adams Boston Lager, they were just the people who came first with those first very crazy flagships. You think about a pale ale today is like, oh my God, there's nothing special about a pale ale. But when there were no pale ales, that was extremely adventurous.
Yeah.
And what set us apart was, and Sam has told this story 100 times if he's told it once, is having the brew pub available and the richness of all the culinary ingredients that exist in a kitchen where the original brew pub existed before the packaged brewery in Milton even was part of the world. And you just start grabbing stuff off the shelf and throwing it in and seeing what it does to flavor profile. What does it do to mouthfeel? Does it make an interesting beer? You play around with alcohol content and flavor profiles and color through the various types of malts that you can get. And you just experiment, and the customers right at the bar immediately tell you love it or hate it.
Yeah.
And you can innovate, and you can iterate very quickly when you're only making it 15 gallons at a time. Versus you got to have your shit together when you're making it 5,000 barrels at a time. And a barrel is 31 gallons. So that's 15,000 gallons. There's 2.25 gallons in a case of beer. So you can do the math. It's a lot of beer we're talking when you're batching.
No, you can do the math.
Yeah, you can.
for anyone that's watching, that will be watching, this is like daily math. I could try and surprise clients by throwing random plates on every now and then, and Nick just ruins it every single time by just trying to do plate math on the fly. And I'm like, how are you performing these algorithms in your head this quickly?
But yes, I would say humility comes from, you have to be able to accept that you don't know all the answers. We, and I mean collectively we, Samurai, myself, and the hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people who, 1,500 people I was fortunate enough to come across in my tenure at Dogfish. I checked before I left. I was able to do that through the payroll system. And all 1,500 people at some point had their hand on the rope pulling Dogfish along.
Mm-hmm.
And every year that we went forward, we reached a point as a business that none of us had ever had experience leading before.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy when you come into it having no experience, no preconceived notions, no formal education, and no real, I'll say, beer guidance. Even our board of directors wasn't filled with just beer experts who had been in the industry for years before we came along. We were making it up as we go.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to recognize that you throw more spaghetti at the wall in the beginning, and the ones that stick, you got to be smart enough to go with. And the ones that don't, you got to be smart enough to let go.
Yeah.
So it's just pure survival, I would call it, more than humility. Because if you didn't adapt and evolve quickly, we wouldn't have existed all along, and it wouldn't exist today.
Right.
So it's hard to describe it until you're in the thick of it, and you're a little bit in the thick of it, creating your own thing here. And you had an idea going into it. I'm going to do this. And along the way, oh crap, that is something I can layer in here. That was stupid. That's a great idea. And you just you got to be nimble. You got to be quick and recognize when an opportunity is going to fit. It's a little bit more opportunistic than strategic. That is a huge difference between the early phases of entrepreneurism. Recognize quickly how to take advantage of opportunities as they're in front of you. But there is a moment that comes where that can be a distraction, where if all you do is sit back and wait for somebody to come and knock on your door and say, I have an idea for you, and you're just playing filter mode, you can get very distracted and get sucked down 10 different rabbit holes, and that is not healthy for your organization. So there is a moment where you have to switch from being opportunistic to being strategic. And strategic is you now sitting down and deciding what I will be and what I want to do 1 year, 3 year, 5 years down the road. But all it acts is as a filter now for those ideas that do come knocking. Now you have a filter mechanism to pass it through and say, does it fit what I'm trying to accomplish? If yes, let's pursue it. If not, it's a waste of my time and a distraction. That's what a strategic plan affords you, is a set of lenses to pass decisions through for fit. People try to complicate it like, ooh, strategy. It's not really that complicated. It's just you being laser focused on what the hell you want, what you want to do, when you want to do it, where you want to go, what you want to accomplish. That's it. That's what strategy is.
Well, speaking of strategy, right? So you guys are riding out the highs. Things are looking all good. For somehow you've lived to the age of 40, from someone that understands it, you found a woman who is way prettier than you to marry you and put up with your shit, and then give you 3 awesome kids, which you guys raised together. It's seemingly like you got the world by the balls. What made you want to cash out?
Well, I guess that's part of the problem. When you're in the thick of it, your head's down, and every waking moment, and sometimes even in my dream sequences, I am thinking through and solving business issues. Think about business first, think about business second, think about business third, and everything else was an afterthought. And that's not balance in life. I sat probably too many hours in a conference room, so it's how our paths crossed. My physical health was shit. I got winded climbing my own stairs in my house. That shouldn't happen. And you just start realizing that I would kid myself. And the idea was always to take a sabbatical, by the way, like get away, recharge, 4 months, 6 months, almost a year, take 6 months to a year off working at Dogfish, go live in Europe with my wife and kids, have them experience a full school year in Europe, a different lifestyle. That's where my wife's from, born and raised in Belgium. The kids are dual citizens. My wife is a dual citizen. And each year you say, all I have to do is tackle these 3 things. And once I get these 3 things, I could finally take that sabbatical. By the time you fix those 3 things, they were 5 more. And when you fix those 5, they were 7. And it became a pipe dream, or I don't know, a silly notion, I guess, somewhere along the way, that the sabbatical would never happen. So when was I going to be able to recharge? And it just starts wearing on you and wearing on you. And as the business gets bigger and bigger and bigger, so does all the responsibility get bigger and bigger. You have a lot of livelihoods that depend on your good decision making, and that just starts to wear on you. And it becomes all encompassing in 24 hours. And the lyrics to Cats in the Cradle was a little too real. And I wanted to know my kids in a much better way than I knew them. And I knew that wouldn't happen in any kind of part-time or quasi mode. So I decided at the end of 16, well, really in the middle of 16, but planned the actual leaving part was the end of 2016 to just step away and devote my time. And fortunately, we reached a point as an organization where financially I was able to do that. So can't just sit there and say it was all this non-altruistic, I want to spend time with my kid. There's no way I would have been able to do that if the business wasn't in a place where I knew that when I stepped away, because when I stepped away fully. It wasn't just as a job and as a minority owner. Well, it was my job as a minority owner and as a board member. It was a full and complete separation from Dogfish. And I was only able to accomplish that because we were in a financial position where I could. And, and so now I'm dad, and I find it took time, but I found that being dad is exponentially harder than any day I had at Dogfish. There's something about it being your own kids versus like the bullshit and the drama that comes with working with people in a restaurant or in the brewery or anywhere. Any job any person has, there's always the people that just grind on them and just morally kick the shit out of them. And there's something easy about tackling that problem there and then going home because you can forget about it. But when it's your own kids, man, whew, you just can't get away from it. It's relentless. In a good way. It's
yeah, of course. Don't worry, you're good.
And I had to change the way that I think. And quite frankly, I finished working at the end of 2016. We started working together right then about that January. And that summer when the kids were out of school, we took a long 5 or 6 week trip down to Australia, New Zealand, San Francisco, Hawaii, just got away. And it was those 5 or 6 weeks on the road that really brought us together as a family. When you're all living out of literally 2.5 suitcases for a family of 5 for a week, for 5 or 6 weeks. Yeah. And a whole lot of it was more roughing it, camping, hotel, motel than it was, 5-star accommodations, anything. And in those moments is where I was able to let go of 24/7 thinking, because it took time. Even when I stopped working, I was still thinking about all the stuff that I used to think about. Yeah. It took time to replace those thoughts with different thoughts. And it was that trip that really began the transformation for me. That was 6 months after I finished working. Some people think they can just, stop working, take a month or two off, and then I'll recharge the batteries and go start a new adventure somewhere. At least in my experience, it took way freaking longer than 1 to 2 months to kind of forget about what it was and the chaos and the excitement and the craziness.
Right.
And yeah.
So hindsight is always 20/20, but from someone who's actually had to make that decision, and you talked a little bit about it, how when you can leverage love, relationship, family, and that kind of stuff into it. But what do you attribute that to when it's the right time to make that call in any business? Because there's a lot of people that hang on for too long and allow that to really weigh in on them. Is that just listening to your gut, your instincts, your women's intuition?
Well, I would say that's a very personal question. And geez, I don't even know. And not because I don't want to answer it. I mean, that's a different answer. You can ask 10 different people. You're going to get 10 different answers there. Somebody can be looking at it very objectively as a business and reading the tea leaves of, I built this thing when this industry really wasn't much, and now this industry is ripe and everybody wants in on it. Key opportunity to cash out. Buy low, sell high. Think of it financially. I built it from scratch or from nothing, and now I have this opportunity to sell it for a gajillion. That's a financial output. But as we all know, some people, or not some people, people get into it for entrepreneurial ideas because it was their idea, and their ideas are their babies, and their babies become the company, and then there's an emotional connection. So how do you balance I can get this gajillion, but I'm selling my baby, for blood diamonds or whatever you're doing. And so you have this tug, this emotional, financial tug. And this dream wasn't my dream in the beginning. I adopted the dream. It became my dream, but it wasn't mine in the beginning. So I didn't have as much on the emotional tug. Yeah. Certainly as Sam and Mariah did, because it was theirs.
Hmm.
and is theirs. So they had a heck of a lot more in the emotional connection side of it. And while I adopted it as my own, um, I had less of that. So I don't know what makes people, sometimes you just flat out get tired
Yeah.
despite the emotional and the financial side. You just hope that the moment you get tired is the moment when you can actually get something for your achievement, for your work.
Right.
And I think of, in this case, I think of my dad. He was a high school biology teacher that later in life, after he got married to my mom, who was a high school math teacher, went back and put himself through dental school, raised a family, worked for 40 years as a dentist, and literally just had to shut his doors one day because there was nobody who came by and said, I want to pay you for, for what you built. It was just, well, nobody wants to buy what I have. Okay, shut the doors.
Huh.
So sometimes you just get tired, and it's the right time to retire, whether you're 40 or 60 or 80.
Yeah.
And in my case, I was lucky enough to be in an industry and with a company that was still extremely hot and
Mhm.
fast growing, and the new shiny toy on the block in the alcohol industry. And things have changed quite a bit in the last few years, that's for sure. I mean, craft continue to grow so exponentially, and yeah, it's a very different world out there right now. It used to be about double IPAs and triple IPAs and
Mhm.
who can out crazy each other, and now it's a heck of a lot more about sessionable cans, 4 to 5% alcohol in a can, so I can take it on my boat, my beach, my
Yeah.
the audience is no longer just that super small niche of beer geeks. Craft has gone a heck of a lot more mainstream, and therefore the product mix has had to adjust from very esoteric beer geeky to more widespread acceptable. And so in that regard, the industry has changed quite a bit. I'm obviously kind of dumbing it down and making broad generalizations right now.
Do you
We
think
could
that
talk
that
for hours.
yeah. It was a general question, but to hear, someone who's had to make obviously that major decision to step away from a multi-million dollar company. Um, but do you think, just as you were saying right there, the industry as a whole, right? So we got into it as a craft beer, micro breweries, these kind of things that were like, even the nuances attached to it are like, ooh, this is kind of unique. Do you feel that it's become a little bit saturated today? That, I mean, I
Oh,
know.
today it started a couple of years ago for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there were the numbers I remembered were there was it went from about 30, forget the exact number now. It was a little over 3,000 craft breweries in. I'm going to get these numbers wrong because it's been too long since I quoted them. Long story short is the number of craft breweries doubled in a 4-year window from
Right.
about 2011, 2012, 2014, 2015. A doubling. That's doubling of companies.
Right.
And each company is making 10 to 15 varieties of beer, flavors, profiles. That's exponential. You
Mhm.
take all of them and they're competing for the same number of tap handles and shelf placements and pint glass by pint glass at your local restaurant.
Yeah.
So the competition became beyond I mean, it was super exponential. Uh, and it used to be a brotherhood, a fraternity, a sorority within the craft beer industry. Everybody looked out for each other. It was all about collaboration. And seemingly within a very short period of time, 12 to 18 months, it went from a lot of collaboration to a lot of competition.
Yeah.
And that just happened because of how many people entered the space with products all trying to compete. And by the way, it also happened to be at the same time when everybody made these massive investments in their companies. To get in the beer business is extremely expensive.
Really.
It takes a lot of stainless steel equipment to make beer. Stainless is expensive. Rough rule of thumb is it's about $200 per barrel that you're selling
Mhm.
is the rough capital cost it takes to get into the beer business. People don't have that kind of cash sitting around under their mattresses. So they borrow from banks. And when you borrow from a bank, like a mortgage payment on your house, you have a monthly nut you need to pay to that bank. So come hell or high water, you better start. You need sales to get to a certain point, so you have enough left over to pay that nut. That also drove a heck of a lot of the competition. It drove a lot of the prices down. It drove a lot of the moves towards commodification within the beer business, towards cans, lower alcohol content,
Really?
widespread appeal than the super esoteric 750 milliliter bottle of some exotic Asian fruit of blah, blah, blah. You know, everybody was trying to outdo each other on crazy. Well, there's only so many words in the English language, and there's only so many ingredients in the culinary landscape to be able to combine. When you have 7,000 people coming up with 10 beers each, it's 70,000 different recipes of beer.
Yeah.
Pretty, yeah. So saturation for sure. And there's something that you just said that reminded me. It'll come back to me.
All right. Well, while we're on the topic of that, obviously a large part of my business is health and wellness coaching for people in the restaurant industry.
Yep.
I do it from a realistic perspective for someone that knows that you kind of like earn your booze. You have to establish a healthy relationship with it. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
the quarantine has put different measures on people as to like, you're your own self-governing body now. So you decide when the right time to crack a beer in the middle of the day is. So
Yep.
it's changed the effect as to, you know, how I'm targeting my audience. But when things were at a normal plane in the restaurant industry, for someone that was, you know, CEO of a major brewery and a restaurant, did you ever find that there was any, that it kind of opened the door for some like potentially hazy consequences running a restaurant or running a brewery for people that are sampling the product a little too often? I mean, you basically, you work at a place like nowhere else in the world. Like if you're a lawyer, for instance, you're not gonna like, hey, let me get that new beer. Do you have that beer in your fridge? Can we try that really quick? You know?
Yeah.
So my topic of choice here with the restaurant industry is that where we start to run into some snags by alcohol just being so readily available to people.
Yeah.
Did you ever run into any problems with that? Whether it was workers, coworkers, you?
Yeah, of course we did. I mean, holy shit, the stories I could think of are insane. Like we had, talking about the ultimate elephant garden, the peanut pile. When I first joined Dogfish, it was a couple crazy things. Everything was done by hand on the line. You had to hand make the cartons and the 6-packs and the 4-packs and hand stuff. But the only thing that was automated was the beer physically going in the bottle and a cap being put on. Everything else was done by hand, which means a lot of moving parts and a lot of high risk exposure. And we had a rule, the unwritten rule in the beer business is at the end of a shift, for small breweries, by the way, this doesn't work for big breweries. At the end of the shift, and you'll see why in a second, all the short fills,
Yeah,
they go to everybody who works there. Because when you start a line up and when you bring a line down, the bottles don't get filled with a full 12 ounce. You get what's called short fills. You add all those up and everybody takes home a couple 4-packs at the end of the day, but they're all, I don't know, 6 ounces, 8 ounces, 10 ounces, whatever they were.
mm-hmm.
Well, people were drinking short fills on the line. You know, we made a 120-minute IPA. It's an 18% alcohol.
No, you can't do that.
At 9 a.m. in the morning, they're pounding short fills on the fucking line.
You can't be doing that.
Yeah, there was a problem. And the same thing on the restaurant side of things. And by the way, they're the ones in charge of how smooth the packaging line works. So the Elephant's Garden and Peanut Pile, oh, it's so weird. We have so many freaking short fills every time we run the really high popular brands that we pick.
I've always found that kind of curious when you have like, to another analogy, like the inmates running the asylum, you know, You're like, what's wrong with inventory this month? I'm like,
yeah, I don't know. Check with accounting.
Yeah. Why are we off with so many 120s? Well, I don't know. I know that he loves 120s, but I don't think that he would drink them that often.
And the same thing happens in the pub world, because at least bartenders and servers, you get your shift drink.
Yeah.
And with shift drinks and shift meals, they can get out of hand real quick because the bartender is going to scratch the back of the server and the server is going to scratch the back of the bartender. And next thing you know, you have rampant alcohol abuse going on at your bar.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, you have to put in place, that brings up the whole idea of HR in the first place, which I'm going to comment on very briefly. Most people think of HR in any organization as the hire, fire, discipline, kind of killjoy of funness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the owners made them that.
Yeah.
or that's not what HR should be. And we had an amazing HR director and then subsequently VP of HR, Cindy, who is also no longer at Dogfish, but Cindy Dunson. And really HR for us was the center of culture. And that was the center of an amazing coworker experience, holistically an amazing coworker experience. That was not just your pay and your benefits, but it was you making sure that every single person had a connection, a true familial connection to the organization. And you fight for your family. And we firmly believe that if we take care of our people take care of Dogfish. And that was a mentality that came from and was fought for every day out of HR.
Yeah.
So it doesn't happen like a light switch, but you have to break that mentality of I'm entitled to this shift drink and I'm entitled to these short fills to, well, hold on a second, what's really going on here? And you start explaining what's happening and like, okay, so why is it fair that you have that, but Bob over here in accounting or Jim out here in the marketplace and sales doesn't?
Right.
And there's an inequity going on. So how do we create an environment where it's equitable and everybody can celebrate each other's successes, and we share in each other's failures in a way that we learn from it and do better? And that was the whole idea of culture generation. So some companies have, and I'm sure some of your listeners work for big, massive corporations, and their employee manual is about that thick.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 500 rules and none of them are enforced. And at Dogfish, our manual was that thick and it was 17 rules, and holy fuck, you better not violate any one of them.
Really?
So that was just a different philosophy of how we wanted to engage with each other and coexist with each other. So we had a very different version of a handbook. You have to have all the legal stuff, the equal opportunity and the no harassment and all the stuff that you got to check those legal boxes. Don't get me wrong, but the stuff that really mattered, the cultural stuff on how we coexist with each other, we held very near and dear. And every single person who joined Dogfish had to go through a full, well, I call it an orientation day. And I led that day. I met with every single group once a month, 15 to 20 people, could be 30, 50 if we're staffing up for summertime. And every single person we addressed and hit them with the same messages and the same level of importance so that they knew that we weren't kidding and we weren't joking. And that was just part of an onboarding process that made sure people fit us. We don't want you to change. Fly your freak flag.
Yeah.
Don't change who you are as a human being, but bring your freak flag and now have it be part of this collective freak show.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
We want the strong man to stay the strong man. And that was pretty awesome. So I brought up the whole idea of HR kind of in response to what you mentioned before, which is, don't you find it tempting? And there could be abuse. Of course there was abuse, certainly early on, but then we did something about it and created a culture that was so holistic in thoughtfulness and we coupled it with an onboarding process that you didn't just let it happen anymore and then kind of whip the dog.
Right.
You beat a dog enough that the dog doesn't even know why it's getting beaten. Instead, we were proactive about it, where we had this culture in place. We properly onboarded people and we communicated about it monthly. We had all coworker meetings once a month where we got everybody stopped doing their job. You came together and we talked about the important shit for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, where it had a safety component, a cultural component, a sales component, financial component. We had a profit sharing program to where guys on the packaging line didn't want to make short fills happen anymore because there was a financial reward in place for hitting a high level of performance and output. Same thing in the kitchen, same thing in the brew house. So align the incentives of the folks working shoulder to shoulder on the floors with what good business outcome looks like. Give them a financial incentive to do that and give them pride in doing that. And culturally, we're able to wrap that all together, onboard people in a proactive, positive way. That's what curbed and controlled the temptation, the constant and perpetual temptation of alcohol being around you at all times.
Right. So you didn't try to do the whole abstinence approach. It was just more like, this is going to happen one way or another. So in what way can we kind of play to our strengths, you know, because we still want this. This is a huge part of the business. So, you know.
Yeah, the restaurants still have shift drinks and the restaurants still have shift meals, but now there's a fairness across the board. And everybody who works at the brewery still got their paycheck case.
Mhm.
Every 2 weeks, you got a paycheck and a case of beer.
Oh yeah.
Like, so don't steal. You get a free case every 2 weeks anyway. And you get a 50% off discount if you go down to the little store downstairs in the tasting room. So there's plenty of opportunity for you to get what you want.
Right.
No need to steal.
Now, being with, like, you know, you've been
by the way, I'm switching over to a Guinness now because I've always been a stout guy, and unfortunately Dogfish has been an IPA house for a very long time, and my favorite Dogfish beer of all time was Chicory Stout. It's not available as often as I'd like it, which is an amazing coffee flavored stout, but Guinness has also been around for quite some time. 1759. They kind of know a thing or two about consistency in making this. So I'm going to switch to a Guinness now because stout is one of my favorite.
Sure rolled with the dirty hoe there.
Style beer. The dirty hoe, yes. Guinness meets Hugaten.
Did what was I going to tell you? So obviously, like we've been training now for what, almost 3 years, right?
Well, it was January of 17,
yeah,
so
a little over.
Yeah.
So knowing kind of where we stand as a realistic approach towards health and wellness. Yeah, I'll lose you in there for sure.
Sunset's coming.
Knowing where we stand on like a realistic approach to health and wellness, and with the buzz that you might have heard about the mental health crisis in the restaurant industry, for someone that's been in the brewery, been in the restaurant industry, how much of that do you think kind of incentivizing and rewarding with alcohol attributes towards sort of the mental health crisis?
Cool.
I mean, you're allowing people to look to their own devices.
That's a freaking loaded question.
Yeah.
So if you're like me, the payday cases stacked up in my office, and I eventually used them as just giveaways. I mean, I happen to live in a development where there's a lot of doctors that live here, and I was so strapped for time, I would take over my 6-pack copay and like, hey, do I have an ear infection going on? Like, yeah, just check out in my mouth or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's more of a bartering, and I could barely keep up with drinking it.
Well, I know you don't.
There's others who drink it religiously every single week. So people have their tendencies and inclinations. I can't quite judge that. What I can say is I now know, I did not know when I was working, but I now know the true effect that for me stress had, less so than the mental health component, the stress component. It's easy to say, oh, it's just stress. Man, stress is an unbelievably powerful force. It affected me mentally, physically, emotionally, and physiologically. In every aspect of my body, I felt it.
Yeah.
And that's part of why we were working together was I don't want to be winded climbing the stairs. Okay, that's just physical. And then I started getting more regular massages because holy crap, man. You know, I think the previous generation, our parents' generation, was the sciatic. Oh, my sciatic. And now it's like neck, shoulders, back. And people have it in different places. And I put it all right up here on the shoulders. And I needed to learn how to take care of my body, how to eat better, how to sleep better. I was sleeping like shit. My wife told me it sounded like I was choking to death at night. And I'm not that big of a guy. Even when we first started, I was $180 and 5'9.5", let's call it. So you wouldn't look at me and say that guy's obese. I wasn't in shape.
Not at all.
I wasn't in shape, that's for sure. And you remember the very first time we met, you did your baseline of sit-ups and how many times can you squat in a minute? Okay, How many pull-ups can you do? I did about a third of one, and I was flailing around and almost kicked you in the balls because I couldn't even do one.
It was a great first date.
It was our first date. And so in every way, stress was just all present, and it took time to understand what that was. So if there's one thing now that I've learned, should I ever go back to an intense work environment or any environment where there's intensity, and I've been on a school board at my kid's school for a long time now, many, many years, and at times that has gotten pretty stressful, to be aware of what role that stress plays and be proactive about it not affecting you it came from that awareness,
Mm-hmm.
but that only came from separating myself. So your question is about the contribution towards the potential of mental health and the reality of mental health issues within the restaurant industry. Until you're removed from it,
Right.
and you have a bit of an out of body, out of industry experience, until you're even aware that it was an issue, you don't know it's an issue. So
I agree.
how do you help people raise awareness that they shouldn't drink as much as they're drinking on or after the job? And
Well,
now with
how much
the
of that do you
pervasiveness of weed,
yeah.
like you could talk about all the other drugs, but weed is very quickly becoming pretty household and commonplace. And I believe in our kids' generation, it's going to be as common as, hey, honey, what shall we have for dinner? Do you want a great glass of Merlot or a hit of Pineapple Express?
Yeah.
So, like, it's just going to happen with so many states already, not only medicinally acceptable, but recreationally acceptable. It's going to happen in our lifetime and in our kids' lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Those are choices, and you have to have a healthy relationship with anything. Healthy relationship with food, healthy relationship with your body, healthy relationship with alcohol, with weed, whatever it is that you're doing. Moderation. Excess of anything is too much.
Yeah. Creating that self-awareness, but that's one of the things that I'm creating protocols and programs and step programs to, one, show like how to create self-awareness, what the fuck it really is, you know, and especially in the restaurant, what that looks like to people, you know, like having self-awareness is being able to stand there at the end of your night and when somebody asks you, like, do you want your shift drink? It's not a right, you know, it might be a right, but it's not to say that it's the norm
It's
in
not an
every other
obligation
culture.
either.
Yeah.
You could say
So
no.
exactly. So if you stood back, like I said earlier, you know, if you're a lawyer, you're not just like, yeah, okay, yeah, where's my beer? You know, but because it's so heavily prevalent in our industry, that's the one thing where you say how anything in moderation is safe, but it takes that separation in order to look back and say, all right, so was that healthy? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like obviously if you survive, you make it to that point, everyone gets there, you learn through your mistakes and I'm a big advocate for growth and stuff, but how much do you believe that culture and environment influences your behavior? Because like a lot of studies show, you know, if you spend your time around 5 people who are all just trying to exist and do their job, go home, or do their job, get drunk, and then go home. For someone who is in the early stages of entrepreneurism or looking to start a business or even having just the thought of wanting to advance themselves, how much do you believe that?
Well, it all stems from I think it all stems from your energy, what you prioritize, what you say is important to you and your organization. I think we both know, living in an area with as many rich restaurants as we have, there are some restaurant owners where you know that if you work there, it's a giant party all day, every day, period. And then there's other places where it is more of a career. It's a choice. It's more than just collecting a paycheck.
Right.
Maybe like Dogfish, there's something culturally connecting you to it. Maybe there's something philanthropic associated with it. So it stems from that energy you bring to it. If you just say, hey, well, Dewey has the reputation, Dewey Beach, crazy scene, you know,
Right.
and I'm not judging anybody who owns an establishment there, but it's girls gone wild sometimes. And, you know, people are coming to get that experience. So you better give them that experience.
Right.
It's hard to separate the girls gone wild, let's go batshit crazy, oh shit, there's Snoop Dogg, to like, oh, moderation, acceptance. You know, I'm not going to have my shift drink today. It's pretty easy to get caught up in that.
Yeah.
It's like working on the Vegas Strip and, you know, I don't know, being a teetotaler. It's
So
hard
that would
to
be
imagine.
where culture does, you know, your environment does influence your behavior in that sense.
Yep. And
Regardless, because as you mentioned about stress, you realize like the toll that it takes on your body. Well, one of the things is that over a period of time, stress lowers your inhibition levels, your willingness to say no, you know, your willpower, because
yep.
you decision fatigue, you know, like you're making decisions all day long. So at the end of the day, when someone presents you with the opportunity, like, so you want this or not? You're like, yes. you know?
Well,
But
and I think there's an age and a maturity thing. The younger you are, especially if you don't have a significant other, a partner, a spouse,
yeah.
you got nothing, and you're just a single man, a single woman going out and tying one on every night.
Mm,
That's a different world you're living in than, say, when you cross the threshold into your 30s, and then you cross your threshold into your 40s. And when you have other mouths to feed, they're
yeah.
dependent on you, and people who count on you in different ways. And quite frankly, you reach a point where you just don't want to wake up with that freaking god awful hangover, that nasty ass taste in your mouth because you just pounded 2 cigars the night before. Like, you're just like, man, what the hell was I thinking? That just sucks. And
Yeah.
that just comes with age too. It's a part of it you grow out of. But your question is more the people who are in the thick of it. How do you reach them? It's a tough question
Yeah.
because you're not necessarily preaching to the choir. It's the opposite. It's very pedantic. You're on your soapbox when you're telling them, and it's like the addict addressing fresh addicts.
Right.
Like, you don't know until you've hit rock bottom, and guess what? You haven't hit rock bottom yet, so none of my words are meaningful to you.
Right.
So is the answer you need to let it ride its course? Can you do anything about it? I don't know. That's a tough. There is no right answer there.
There's not. No, it was a loaded
No.
question.
Yeah.
um, so in respects to that, then for, let's just say the person who is looking to, we'll still talk about the person who's thinking about an idea of going out into the world. So I'm a firm believer that there are a lot of people in the restaurant industry. I think it honestly harbors some of the most brilliant and creative minds, for a lot of people, because it attracts that type of person that enjoys travel, that enjoys making money and meeting people and communicating. So I do believe that there's a lot of ingenuity there. So how much do you believe, or like, what are your thoughts on mentorship and self-education for people that are in the restaurant that don't know what they're doing?
Stop doing it. And that's true if you don't know what you're doing in any pursuit in life. You don't know what you're doing. Stop.
Yeah. Or you're just running red
Uh,
lights.
Presumably, if something is so passionate at your core that you want to pursue it as a career and you want to pursue it as your life's passion, you're likely going to know what you're doing. Not in totality, but you're going to have a pretty good, you're going to have a plan, you're going to have an idea, you're going to be head down and believe in your idea so much it's intoxicating that others can't help but believe in and think about what you're doing. If you don't have that level of engagement and excitement about what you're doing, please stop right now. Stop. Find something else. By
Really?
and large, people in the restaurant business are not much different than people in the beer business. They're fairly anti-establishment, don't want to work for a Fortune 500 company, show up at 9, leave at 5, clock in and be a drone.
Yeah.
Fairly independent spirits. They value their independence. They value their, they want to have their own creativity, their own say and direction, self-direction. In fact, that's an interesting fact.
Which does bear a striking resemblance to the mind of an entrepreneur, though, if you look at the characteristics of it.
Exactly the mindset of an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
That's why I'm bringing it up. An entrepreneur in restaurant, beer, or any industry is somebody who had some of the best business models came from the statement, boy, I wish somebody figured out fill in the blank.
Right.
Somebody went and just figured that damn thing out instead of the person sitting there wondering who should figure it out. And I believe there is a component of micro risk taking. It's something that I've been, I guess, studying more recently, later in life than younger in life. You're the first kid to climb up to the back of your dad's pickup truck and jump off it just because you wonder what would happen. You broke your arm, but you learned something. And then you're the kid who doesn't mind asking the doctor a question at your wellness visit when you're 9 years old. And you're the kid who says, I dare you to, you take the dare and you do it. And a lot of the stakes of that little stuff early in life are not that high. They're not life altering. They're not life changing, but it establishes a pattern of micro risk taking in your life. And when you sum together hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of instances of micro risk taking, as you get older, it is easier and there's less paralysis for you to take those risks with a great idea or a great product or a great concept. And it's less daunting to say, well, shit, I don't know 50 things about where I'm going. How am I going to finance it? Who's going to work for me? Where am I going to sell it? Whatever it is, who are my clients, my customers? But you believe in it enough that you know you'll figure it out because you've already taken all these micro risks in your life. This is just another 15 or 20 or 50 of those micro risks in the journey of life. So to me, I see a high correlation between that mentality and outlook in life in the successful entrepreneurs I've come across than the ones who aren't. Some people are just made to wake up, go make the donuts every day and come home. Yeah. I used to say that at Dogfish, like, you need donut makers. We don't need everybody to be reach for the stars, going to be VP one day. Sometimes you just need people who are going to show up and make the donuts. Yeah. And that's okay.
No, you do. Yeah.
And there's a place for that too, but the entrepreneur is bigger than that. And some of the best advice I have for any entrepreneur is don't fucking listen to anybody's advice. Like, everybody's coming at it from some different perspective. And the best you can do is be open-minded enough to listen to everybody. Well, let me rephrase that. Hear everybody, but listen to no one.
Right.
Gather all of that information, process it, and do your own thing, but don't actually just follow in the footsteps of what others have done. Otherwise, it's not unique. There's nothing compelling about what you're doing.
Do you believe in that, like having, because you never really mentioned anything outside of that mentorship, and that's something that a lot of, let's say, self-help gurus and things like that, they all preach coaches and mentors and this kind of stuff. Do you believe in that then for people that are a little misguided or just need that, like, hey, can I ask you about this?
You know, at Dogfish, we had for our entire management team, anybody who's a supervisor, a manager, a director, a VP, all the way up to Samurai and myself. Anybody who would you consider in management as opposed to an hourly staff worker. For years, we had a performance coach involved at Dogfish. And the idea was, how do we train our leadership to be better leaders? And that begets the whole argument of, are they born or are they created? I think it's a little bit of both, but that's besides the point. We made available to everybody performance coaches that would help develop you, whether it was, how do you deliver a bad message? How do you have a performance review? How do you fire somebody? How do you coach a very difficult coworker? How do you, whatever. You were able to go in there. We didn't structure these. It was truly between the person and their coach. Work on whatever you want to work on to be a better leader and manager. We didn't go in and tell them what they had to work on. And through this performance coaching, in our own way, we were attempting to provide the resources necessary for people who wanted and was open to that coaching and feedback to get better at whatever they were looking to get better at in life.
Yeah.
What I found is the law of thirds kicked into play. A third grabbed it by the horns and just became rock stars. A third did not fucking get it at all. Very quickly, they were not in a leadership or management role.
Yeah.
And a third were kind of lost in the middle, that were never really going to develop into the rock stars, but they did enough to continue on a slower version of the path that they were on. So to answer your question, or to come full circle, I believe coaching helps those who want to be coached.
So it's kind of like, as the saying goes, that like when the student is ready, the master will arrive, kind of thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I would say, on top of all of that, the master can't come with answers. The master has to come with questions. And that's what good performance coaches, not the kind of coaching you're doing, but the coaching that I have experience with from Dogfish came from, which was, well, here's some constructs that can help you solve your own problems. But if you're not ready to help yourself, I can't help you.
Yeah.
Is the idea. So coaching is a wonderful thing for people who are pursuing a lifelong journey of continual improvement and continual knowledge seeking.
Mm.
Coaching falls on deaf ears to people who don't want it, don't recognize what it is, and don't know how it will help, and has no desire to learn or improve. So I guess you have to read the student to figure out whether the coaching works.
Well, as the law of thirds, as you mentioned, will present itself, that's kind of the type of person that I'm at least putting this out there for. You know, if you're ready, we're here.
Yeah, exactly. If you're ready.
So if I can get it out to the masses, and for those people who are looking to improve and feel like there isn't someone to turn to, that was kind of my whole reason for starting this business. As you said, you know, for the person that says, man, I wish there was blank, you know, that was me. I was just a degenerate. I mean, not a degenerate. I lived that bartender life where I was a personal trainer by day and bartender at night. And I just got so burned out, and I knew that I was always searching for something, and I was always constantly learning and trying to learn and picking the brains of people that I was training. But then I would go into the restaurant, and it was just like, oh man, you know, I'm surrounded by people who don't want to learn anything. And then, but the whole time they're asking me these questions and doing things, and I didn't even realize that I was in turn coaching and helping other people. And I was just like, man, I wish I had someone that would tell me what to do. And it was just like, oh yeah, what are you doing right now? So
Well,
that was kind of like,
necessity and crisis are the mother of all invention. So
yeah,
it's a bit serendipity, bittersweet, but serendipity that this pandemic crisis is upon us, because it afforded you the opportunity to focus,
right.
as opposed to continuing nights, weekends, special times, still bartending,
Mm-hmm.
all the clientele working at the gym, and then
Yeah.
thinking about what this business is that you've been thinking about for a while. You had 3 pools on your mental, physical, and awareness. And now the gym's closed. The restaurants are closed.
Yep.
You get all of your time and
Yeah.
effort on something.
Opportunity born from obstacles.
That's and that's a wonderful thing. But again, I go back to micro risk taking, and I don't know your history well enough to know what your micro risks are that you're taking, but there's, when moments present themselves like this, it's lemons. I mean, that's what a whole lot of people are being dealt with right now. Being dealt with lemons. Lost my job, my company, somebody's sick, my family member's sick, I'm stuck in my house, oh woe is me, what can I do? Eeyore mentality. And there's others who are fucking killing it. There are business models that are going to come out of this that nobody ever thought would be possible. There are plans being written today that in 100 years would have never been written if it weren't for this virus. So I'm not saying this is the best thing since sliced bread. It sucks ass every day for so many people. But there are people who do something about it, and there are people who just, So I find whether it was COVID-19 today or whatever else in their life tomorrow, if you're predisposed to Eeyore your way through making excuses on why everything in life sucks for you,
Yeah.
kind of the path you're going to stay on.
Yeah. I mean, as it would, like, you know, making life happen for you or letting life happen to you. So just as you said it right there, it is perfect. So anyone that will be listening to this, rewind that, play it back. That's what you need to hear as we continue to move forward. Since there's always so much cash that is floating around, right? So assuming the restaurants will open back, or the cash that people are sitting on right now, I find that one of the major topics of discussion for people in the industry is investments, right? Or what to do just to be any sort of financially responsible. So in your opinion, what would you suggest that people who are just starting out, right? We're not talking about like have been saving for years and putting away all this stuff. And let's pretend the quarantine never happened. What would you suggest that they invest their money in if we're looking for long-term potential growth?
Holy shit, I cannot possibly
I'm 23 years old. I
begin to describe how unqualified I am to answer this question. You might as well ask me about how to properly set a perm on a 50-year-old male hair. Uh, God,
Should I
that is
should I
such
just go
a
buy a Porsche or should
well, that's if you want to have fun and say fuck the investment. Um, God, I mean,
swing and a miss? Take a shot.
it all depends on what you're looking to do with it. If retirement mentality says find investments that have a long-term horizon, I want to invest it, not touch my money and not do stupid stuff with it. You need to find stuff that's going to pay off a long time down the road. You can tie your money up for longer periods of time.
Yeah.
Your risk profile comes into play. Are you risk averse or are you wild west? You're willing to take on boatloads of risk. Do you need income?
Mm-hmm.
Is it income or growth? Do you want to park your money for a long period of time and get a payout somewhere in the future? Or do you want to invest today in like bonds every single year? You're going to get a certain level of income coming off of it. Traditional investment advice is usually age-based. That says the younger you are, the more loaded into stocks and higher risk stuff because you can weather the storm a lot longer. The older you are, you want to be more in that safer fixed income end of the spectrum. Where do
No,
you put your money? I would say, first of
good.
all, you need to talk to somebody who is qualified. Second, be very open and honest about your risk profile. And it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I want all the upside, give me the high risk stuff. But that means that you also have to be willing to accept the I can lose it all end of the spectrum. So be honest about your risk profile, come up with a plan. And more than anything, like just stick to it. And I used to always give the advice to people like, where should I invest my money? And I'd ask them, do you have a mortgage? Well, yeah. Do you have a car payment? Yeah. Do you have student loans still? Yeah. Do you have, the list goes on and on of where do you have credit card debt? Yeah. When you line all those up, your mortgage might be at 5%, your car payments at 2.5%, your student loans are at 1%, but your credit cards are at 17%. There's no better return on your investment than paying down your highest interest rate shit in your life. That is a guaranteed return in your life.
That's good advice.
Before you start thinking about return on investment, you should take a look at what the current state of your life was. And I graduated from college in 1996 with 80 grand in student debt. My parents didn't have a lot of money to send me to school. So I took out a boatload of grand. That might not sound like a lot by today's standards, where a year at college is probably 80 grand. Yeah. Back in 96, that was a lot of freaking money. And I lived like a pauper, and I learned what an amortization schedule was very quickly. I was an engineer by degree. I didn't do anything financially related, but I taught myself in Excel how to model stuff because I wanted to better understand, well, what if I gave $10 more or $50 more or $100 more every month to that particular loan? What do I save at the end? And that really got me interested and excited about numbers in a different way than engineering, more financially related, that ultimately led to business school and beyond. But yeah, pay down some of the expensive shit in your life is a great way to quote unquote earn money today. That's a guaranteed return on your, and I know you know that people who live in the restaurant business are not living debt-free in life. There's a boatload of debt tied up on a lot of shit. Jet skis and especially where we live in a coastal town, there's a lot of frivolous stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well said, though. For someone that doesn't know anything, that was the answer I was honestly looking for. So I know that now, always now, but I know this, that you are a huge car fan, Porsche in particular.
Yes, Porsche. You're gonna
Porsche. I don't like all that, but it sounds funny in my mouth.
It is Porsche, yeah.
This is Porsche. So I know that you love cars. Was that an incentive for you, like along the way? Did you use incentive, motivations, like things that you know that like, all right, your 5-year plan coming up, if I hit this number, if I do this, if I got this quota, did you incentivize things, or was it just like numbers game? Let's go.
First of all, while we may look close in age, but we don't,
That
My
hurt.
generation, you had posters
That
on
hurt.
your wall, which is funny because we during this crisis, we're going out, we're hitting all of the Delaware state parks with the kids, and we're walking every trail we can find. Like, we live in this state, we haven't been to Prime Hook and Trap Pond, and now we're going there because it's a place to get away, still quarantine, and you don't run into a lot of people. And while we're on these walks, we just talk about stuff. And one of them was posters. And they're like, what are you talking about? Posters on a wall? What the hell is that? And I was like, that's what we had. We didn't have the internet, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
So I had car posters on my wall. And that was always the like, oh my God, the Lamborghini Countach and the Porsche and the this and the that and whatever it was. And I got Road and Track and Car and Driver. And I read every friggin' magazine I could. Why? Because there was no internet. And I sure as hell wasn't going to go to the library and read a boring ass novel because that was not exciting to me. So I was always a car guy. And I never thought I'd be able to afford any of them. And so it wasn't so calculated that it was a reward. You reach certain points where you're like, for the first time, it doesn't feel like I have to wait till the next paycheck just to pay for every obligation of my life. I may have a few extra bucks here. What do I do with that?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, settle down. It might not happen again. Holy shit, it just happened again. All right. You're like, that's $50. That's $100. Wait a minute, $100. Go back to the amortization thing. That can pay for a loan of X. What would I do with that money? That's how twisted my brain was, which was like the extra money idea. And this is before kids and before dog and before house. We're renting, we're moving around in life and doing what we're doing. My wife's an inner city school teacher and I'm an engineer. So no, there was nothing calculated. It was more, fuck it, let's just do it.
But at least it was the deep-seated childhood manifestation.
It was always aspirational.
Yeah,
it was aspirational. The way that magazines portray to you that the Rolex watch is aspirational. It's like, I worked for 40 years and at retirement I got the Rolex. And there are certain things that are just ingrained in you from where you grew up, and it's different if you're Michigan versus San Diego versus Lewis, Delaware. But there's certain things that are just aspirational that you associate with, I've done something okay or pretty good in my life. Let me reward myself. And people reward themselves in different ways. And I'm a mechanical engineer that loves mechanical simplicity. I love watches, fountain pens, cars, anything that is just mechanical, beautiful simplicity.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And now I'm at the point where it's one thing to stroke a check and just buy the cars, but it's another thing to get visceral with it and get kinetic with it. And that's what I enjoy now is I'm tearing one down and building my own outlaw car. I'm working on my own race car because I've raced cars for a number of years. And it's far more satisfying to enjoy it and love it as a passion and a hobby and know that I did almost everything on it on my own, as opposed to just, I'm just a wealthy douchebag who can stroke a check for the yacht.
Right.
It's a little less satisfying, but you built that yacht with your own hands. Well, that's kind of cool. So that's, for me, it's very rewarding to be able to afford these things that were on my wall at some point that I never thought I'd be able to, but also to take all those micro risks and have the kind of lifelong pursuit of learning new shit to figure out how to actually build it and tear it down and rebuild it and have fun with it. That takes it to a whole new level of craziness, but most Porsche guys are pretty fanatical, hands-on nuts. So
yeah, I've seen
the whole subculture that you're talking about, the restaurant subculture. Holy shit, go dive into the car subculture, and each mark has their own crazy little corner to go explore. Whack jobs.
Yeah, I can feel that. There's those in every industry, though.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of advice would you have for anyone that is listening, thinking about actually going into the brewery business these days?
Don't.
I would have put all my money on that.
Oh shit. Honestly, well, right now is extremely difficult. And I've been in touch with a number of friends in the industry, especially those that are smaller on the packaging side and bigger on the brew pub side.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're getting crushed because of the pandemic. The brew pubs are shut down. They could do to go, but that's only a super small fraction of whatever they used to do. So it's not much unlike everybody in the restaurant business right now.
Hmm.
It's a whole lot that aren't going to make it out the back end of this.
Do you think that it will unsaturate it a little bit?
For sure, because you're going to see an explosive rate of closures, like boom. And I'm not talking a decline. I'm talking a plateau level of closures. Having said that, that's opportunity. There's a lot of equipment that will be available. There's a lot of knowledgeable people who will be looking for jobs. So yeah, it sucks, and a whole lot of people aren't going to make it. But if you have capital, if you have something that's differentiated, you have something that's unique, and you happen to be in the right area where you can take advantage of people or equipment availability, there's going to be some opportunity that comes out. But I believe that through everyone. There's people overextended in their lives who have second homes down here in this very area. They own boats, they own houses, they own cars, they own everything. And people are going to get desperate when things are as crazy as they are. So good opportunities for investing in things and picking up something that you've always dreamed of but never thought you can afford because it was out of reach. I think some things are going to come in reach because of desperation of this whole situation that we're living in right now.
Yeah.
You're thoughtful and methodical and well-researched on that thing that you're looking for. Be patient. And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting opportunities coming up. Brewery, no different. So.
Well said.
Yeah.
Now, I know you've been out for quite some time, but what are your thoughts on the merger?
You mean between Dogfish and Boston Beer?
That is.
Oh my God. I have been out for a while, but well, I don't know. I guess time is going to tell. It's a willing buyer and a willing seller.
Yeah.
And why did the buyer want to buy? Time's only going to tell on that. I don't know. Boston Beer doesn't have really any kind of distillation component, spirits component to their business. Might they leverage that?
Mm-hmm.
Boston Beer has been known for their lager and other brands over time, less so their IPAs. Dogfish is an IPA house, primarily known for their IPAs. So might there be something synergistic there to leverage the Dogfish IPA portfolio? I mean, even the cannabis play, there's a whole lot of breweries exploring the use of CBD and cannabis within products.
Yeah.
I don't know. Dogfish seems like a good brand family within the Boston Beer portfolio of companies to explore with that versus their mothership of Boston Beer. Might they have done it for that? I don't know. I can only speculate what it might be. That was the willing buyer part. The willing seller part. They had a private equity investor that was towards the end of the private equity investment. So they're no longer in the picture. So part of this might have been an exit strategy for that investor scenario. I really don't know. I didn't pay attention. I read the K1 and kind of the stuff on the Boston Beer side because they're a publicly traded company, so you can get way more information. But most organizations that are breweries in the craft beer business are closely held, private, family, multifamily, sometimes multi-generational family businesses, and their motives are private, and you'll never know because they're not obligated to disclose.
Yeah.
So why ultimately did Sam and Mariah choose to sell? That's their choice. Why did Boston Beer buy? I only have a few speculative reasons that I outlined a few of them there. Who knows? But time will tell. We'll see what direction Boston Beer takes the Dogfish portfolio.
Lovely. Is there anything else that you have to share for the young entrepreneur person like you? Maybe they have hair, maybe they don't. But that are looking to go out in a time like this. I know you capitalized on a lot of stuff throughout this, and you know, scrambled up a huge omelet of wisdom for everybody. And I'm greatly appreciative of that. But any touching notions to finish off with here?
Don't listen to a fucking word I said or anybody said. Follow your shit. Ask questions, don't have answers. That's it. You can learn an awful lot from everybody you encounter by asking questions. That's it. We went out and, I mean, from how do I find money? I don't know. Let me go talk to 2 or 3 or 4 bankers and ask them a boatload of questions. I know I will never do business with them, but I'm going to learn something from them by pounding them with questions. And through that process, you'll now be able to hone and fine tune your approach for the bank you really want to work with. Okay, well, how do I find that thing I'm looking for, that ingredient, that material, that vendor, that service? Go talk to ones you know you're not going to use and harvest them for as much info as you can for the one that you will. Be resourceful. That's it. And you'll go pretty far. Don't let anybody tell you no.
Perfect. Mic drop. Done.
Yeah. All I have is a bent garden cap.
I know. I keep playing with this thing. I can't stop. I think I cut my finger open on it.
The dirty hoe is a good combo for anybody interested in that.
All right, guys. This is Nick Benz here, CEO, CFO, COO, coming at you live.
Oh.
Yeah. Thank you, brother. It's been a pleasure.
And I'll leave you with one final piece of advice. I was invited by my high school to do the commencement speech a few years ago. And I ended with something my dad told me literally the day of my graduation, the reception line of my graduation, that says, if you can't dazzle them with your brilliance, baffle them with your bullshit. And I've needed equal parts of brilliance and bullshit in my life. And I suspect a lot of others do too.
Couldn't agree more.
All right. Peace out.
All right, brother. Thank you so much, man.